I just got to a point where felt numb. I felt like a shell of the human that I knew that I was and that I was capable of being. He was like, Shannon, you're going to have to be more grateful. And I was like, oh, really? Like, that's what you choose to say in this moment? Like, I'm grateful. Of course I'm grateful. And it was through actually starting to sit in the silence and like listen into my own guidance that I was like, I need to go deeper. Once you start having these emotional releases, you're like, awesome, not carrying that one anymore. Check, it's gone. I had to learn to let go of constantly being in control. And if you can figure out how to use it to empower yourself, I mean, makes you a little bit unstoppable. That has been one of the most incredible things that I've learned with the breath, is this tool that we carry around with us that we don't realize how powerful it is. You watch some of the smartest kids, the best athletes, right? All these kids that were like, they're going to have a successful career and they're going to go on to do all these great things. They're in high school and they're having panic attacks on the court.
Well, welcome back to the show, everybody. I have such a dear friend and special guest today. Shannon Missimer is here with us. She is such a kind and gentle soul. I always feel so centered and grounded in her presence. She's the co-founder of the Motion of Gratitude, a mission-driven organization dedicated to helping individuals cultivate intention, gratitude, and presence in their daily lives. Through education, practice, and community, the Motion of Gratitude empowers people to shift from autopilot to a life of deeper connection, purpose, and well-being. As a certified breathwork facilitator, Shannon guides individuals in using breathwork as a tool for nervous system regulation, emotional release, and inner clarity. Her work bridges science and mindfulness, offering practical ways to reduce stress, enhance resilience, and create lasting transformation. She is also the host of the Motion of Gratitude podcast, where she shares meaningful conversations, insights, and tools to help listeners embrace gratitude, presence, and intentional living. Whether through the Motion of Gratitude experience, breathwork sessions, or the podcast, Shannon's mission is to support others in unlocking the power of presence and self-discovery. Shannon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
That is my pleasure. So was gratitude always a focus in your life?
No, definitely not. I think gratitude is one of those things that we think about as something that we're supposed to do, right? I think a lot of us can connect to the fact that, growing up, it's like, make sure you thank your grandmother, for the gift, or, make sure you're showing gratitude. And I think we can get in this cycle of doing it from this unconscious place of just, especially in the world that we live in, where it's like hashtag blessed, hashtag gratitude. So there's a lot of that. And I think we can get lost in this idea of, thinking that gratitude is something that we're supposed to be doing. But for me, that my understanding of gratitude really shifted in a really intense season of my life. So about 7 years ago, I was a stay-at-home mom. Prior to being home, I was a type A human, worked in sales. In my 20s, it was like,
does the type A stop when you were a stay-at-home mom, though? Just out of curiosity.
You have to like break in half.
You do?
Stop.
Okay.
Yes. It was it was all about that external validation, right? Like my life was so determined by the recognition and the promotions and just the connection to whatever somebody was saying, doing a good job. They were kind of leading the path. But when I realized I wanted to have a family, there was just something inside of me that said, you're meant to stay home and you're meant to raise your babies. And so, it took a transition, right? It took this downshift to really learn to slow down and be present. And, our first was a trick baby. She literally, I thought I could parent anything. And so that type A was like, yes, she's on a schedule. Yes, she's sleeping. Like we eat at this time, we sleep at this time. Like every day was
my
the same.
kid is, right?
Yeah. I was like, we got
the way
this.
I do life.
Yeah, exactly. So the first one was like, oh, bring it on. I can handle this parenting thing. And then our second, she just had a different plan for the world. She came here day one on her own agenda. And, she really struggled with, no one else could comfort her. I was kind of mom or nobody. She wouldn't take a bottle. She was always nursing. She had colic. She had reflux. So she was up all the time. Her screams and cries, no matter what she needed, it was like this intense, screech that hits you down in your core, right? So your nervous system is shot, right? So I just got to a point in my life where I couldn't dig out. In my 20s, I used exercise to dig out, when the emotions hit, it's like, go to the gym, run, get it done. But I was in a season where I couldn't always leave to get to that place. I couldn't always have that time and space. And I just got to a point where felt numb. I felt like a shell of the human that I knew that I was and that I was capable of being. And, my husband would just come home from work and I would just dump on him like all the things that went wrong. Right. And I got to a point where I realized I was like, I don't want to feel this way. Like this is literally, I don't want to change my external environment. I know that I want to be here and raise my babies. So like, how am I going to show up differently? And we've had this conversation before. I finally got to a point where I was like, no one's coming, Shannon. Like no one's coming to make you actually take care of yourself and make yourself a priority and to show up for yourself in this season of motherhood. And so I realized in that season, there weren't many things that I could grab for externally, right? Like I couldn't go on a week-long retreat. Like I couldn't, do seminars to really, dive into these spaces. And I realized I had to find tools that I could connect with in the moment in my own time. And I got really intentional with gratitude. It was like, Shannon, you guys have worked so hard to be in this season, and now you're missing all of these things that you work so hard for. Because yes, there are some really deep things going on in your life that are so hard. And there's these beautiful moments that you have worked to actually experience, and don't miss them. So I started to actually have practices and be intentional in gratitude journal. And, 2 weeks into that, like everything started shifting. I was like, what is happening? You're like, this is so simple, right? It's just starting my day by intentionally focusing on what's going right, as opposed to telling the story of all the things that were broken yesterday, So I started to come to that space and then really learned what it meant to be present in my life through, mindfulness and just connecting back into my life. And it changed everything. It changed my parenthood journey. It changed my relationship with my husband. It changed how, we parented. We ended up traveling and RVing and homeschooling because it was like there's a new way to see the world. So it just was really the catalyst of a massive shift in my life. And it just felt like, it's one of these tools that we all carry with us, but we don't even realize how impactful it can be.
Wow, what an amazing story. So, but how did you find it? Like, did somebody introduce you to mindfulness? Were you Googling? Did you go to a class? Like, how did you stumble upon? Because, like you said, it's one of those things that I think we kind of just like gloss over, like, oh, yeah, I'm grateful, but you're really not. But we say the words and we check the box. But it's different when you can really drop in to gratefulness. Like, how did you find that in that moment of desperation?
Yeah, it's actually funny. So one of the times where my husband came home and he was, I was sharing all the things that went wrong. He looks at me and you could tell he's trying so hard to pick his words, right? He's like, how can I say this in a way that doesn't like completely rock the boat? But he was like, Shannon, you're going to have to be more grateful. And it was like, and I was like, oh, really? Like, that's what you choose to say in this moment? Like, I'm grateful. Of course I'm grateful. Like, I'm talking about being grateful all the time. And it was just, those moments where sometimes words just stick and you're like, okay, there's something here for me. And I just couldn't shake it. The first day or two, it was anger of like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And then you're still thinking about it and you're like, okay, maybe there is something there. And it's like, yeah, he's right. Like I'm missing out on all of this stuff. And so it just, the idea of gratitude and intentional gratitude really stuck. And so that became one of the things where it's like, okay, what could I do differently? And I had started to hear people talk about gratitude journaling, but I couldn't find a process in which to start. So it's like, pick up a journal and start writing what you're grateful for. And that really became the beginning. And it was through actually starting to sit in the silence and like listen into my own guidance that I was like, I need to go deeper. And that's where I went into mindfulness. So like I had tried meditation before and I was like, nope, this isn't for me. Like my mind's all over the place. But I think that gradual one, starting to calm the nervous system, connect back into my body, get out of my head through the gratitude, just started to open up this gateway to say like, okay, start to explore mindfulness in a different way and find things that really support you. So it kind of became this, just follow the path as it felt connected. And that's really what led me on that journey.
So can you help us understand, like, what types of things would you find in the beginning that you were grateful for? And what types of things did you have to let go of focusing on?
Yes. I still remember the one day. So I remember the first day I sat down to write and every part of my being was like, there's nothing here. Like there was so much like sitting there looking at my book, and I'm like, I don't even know when I'm going to sit down and write. And it was one of those things where it's like, really, really, Shannon, like take a moment, like take an extra second and sit in this space and allow yourself to like kind of release all of the things that all the stories that have been there saying everything is intense and hard, and just give yourself one moment to connect with like what's here. And I remember being like, I'm grateful for actually getting up on my own terms this morning. Like I didn't wake up to a crying baby, even if it was, 5 minutes to myself. There's something that happens when you wake up before the cortisol kicks in, when someone's screaming and yelling and you jump out of bed and you feel like you're getting attacked by a bear. Like if that's how you start your day and you don't do anything to shift out of that, that's how your day goes. Mm-hmm. So it was really connecting to the space of, I'm grateful for this quiet time to myself. And I do remember one day it was still such a hard day. And I was like, I am grateful for gravity, because my God, this would be so hard if I was like floating around, right? Like imagine how hard this day would be if my feet like were not firmly planted on the ground,
Like, what would I hang on
Yeah,
to?
it's like, and then your mind starts to be like, oh, what would that be like? It starts to play this other game. But I remember some days and I had to learn to let go of constantly being in control or wanting to be in control, and that was, and always is, right? But that was such a big shift for me. And, I started to see through the practice, it was literally the little things that I was the most grateful for. It wasn't like the big things that I thought would always make me happy. It was like these little tiny moments that, we all say is what truly matters. But when you take the time to sit and write it out, it's like, those are the things that I am really grateful for in these moments.
It's crazy. Like all the cliche things are so true, aren't
I know.
they?
Yes, you're like, oh, yeah, that it makes sense.
If only I listened to my mom like 40 years ago.
Yes, exactly.
I wouldn't be here right now.
Exactly. All the wisdom. Yes.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between mindfulness and gratefulness?
Yeah. So, what I have always said is, what gratitude did for me is it allowed me to almost live in this space of and, right? It's like, it's not, I think a lot of people think that gratitude is supposed to like replace the hard feelings, where it's like when you're in a hard moment, it's like, well, just be grateful. And it's like, no, that's actually not what it is at all. It's not meant to, one, like shame us into like, well, you should be grateful. Like that's the opposite of what it's really there to do. But it's there in the moments of when we are in this story of intensity and overwhelm. And quite frankly, in the world that we live in, those are the stories we're being pushed. Those are the stories we're being told constantly. So if you are watching the news, even just out in the world, you are hearing constantly all of the things that are going wrong or that need to shift and change. So what gratitude did for me, and what, through all the beautiful science that's been done and through other people that have gone on their own gratitude journey, it just allows you to know that that's there and then reconnect with, okay, but what in my life is still going right? Right? It's like no matter what moment you're in, even if it's super intense, there are things that you can find that are still going right. And if we don't consciously do that, especially in the world that we live in, we miss so much of our life and we get caught in this constant state of anxiousness and overwhelm. And, I can go into all the beautiful stuff with the nervous system and how we're stuck in this place of fight or flight. So I think, gratitude really has allowed me, and just through the years of really having these conversations with people, it just creates this softening and like reconnection back to the present moment. And I think a lot of people see gratitude as a form of mindfulness. But for me, gratitude has really started the process of connecting back to the present moment. And then mindfulness really allows me to go deeper and really see like what is here in this moment. Being the type A human that I was, I spent a lot of time in my head, like my whole life in my head, and yes, exactly. And it's like, I didn't even realize till I started meditating how much anxiousness and overwhelm was driving my decisions and how much I was not actually being present in my life because I was so focused on, okay, what's the next goal? What's the next thing that I'm accomplishing? And so it created this space to come back into the present moment, to reconnect with, one, what's going on, like intuitively, how am I feeling? How's the body feeling? Connecting back into the present moment, which has created so much more clarity in my life to step into the places that I really want to be in and to be able to show up and have the conversations that I want to have from a place of intention and clarity rather than overwhelm and anxiousness, and the overthinking mind. So I think that's really been the beautiful thing. It's really connected me to that internal world to then be able to show up in the external world the way that I want to.
Yeah, without a lot of thought too, I would imagine, right? Like, if you're just present
Yes.
and you're not focused on the end, then it just seems like the conversation and what you're supposed to do happens organically. Would you
Exactly.
agree? Yeah.
Exactly. We do have so much more wisdom than we truly understand, right? And it
Yeah.
feels silly. Like you and I have had this conversation before. It's like I feel like I'm talking about woo, but in reality, it's been the best performance, enhancer of my life, right?
Best
So it's
performance enhancing drug that
yes,
exists.
exactly. So it's like it's such an interesting journey when you go on it, because sometimes you're like, wow, this feels really deep, and then you also see how it plays out in your life, and you show up in the places that you're meant to be in, the conversations that you have either worked so hard to be in, you're actually present to either give the message or do the work in such a different way. So yeah, it's such a funny space to be in sometimes.
Yeah, it really is. One of the things that you said, I just want to touch on for a second, because we were talking about it before we got rolling here. And, you'd said gratitude, it doesn't mean that you're not still dealing with whatever it is, but you can start to see what else is going great in your life and, or the wisdom and like, what is this doing for me? Like 'cause a lot of times I show gratitude for the experience. Like, thank you. You know what? Because that would have never been broken if this just didn't happen, because this has happened before. I need to grow here. But can you talk a little bit about emotional release? And that's what I heard when you just talked about that it's okay to be in this moment and feel anger or hurt or sad or whatever, and also recognize all the beauty that's in your life and what this moment could be teaching you. Do you find that
Yes.
gratitude helps people have that balance?
Absolutely. I would say it definitely has for me. It was this gateway to actually understanding the importance of emotional release in our life.
Yeah.
I think so many of us truly do stuff down how we're really feeling. And I think in recent years, there's been some incredible research that talks about, the body keeping the score. Like we all think if we stuff it down, it's going to go away. But in reality, it's accumulating, right? And then it ends up coming out in these spaces where we don't want it to, because
Right.
we get to this point of being out of control of that space because everything just builds and builds and builds under the surface. And if we don't allow ourselves that release, then it's going to happen at a time when we don't want it to. And I think that was one of the most interesting things that I did. So after my breathwork certification, I went on for a trauma awareness certification, because when you're getting into these spaces of really connecting with your breath, in the same way that stress and emotion can sit under the surface, we store stories and trauma and experiences in our life. And so I wanted to better understand it as I was really creating spaces for people to dive into these internal places inside of themselves. And I thought one of the interesting things that makes so much sense, but we don't always think about it all the time, is so there is actually a stress cycle that we go through. So every time there's something that happens in our life, there's a full cycle that happens, and the last step of that cycle is a release. So
Mm.
if you think about an animal out in nature, right? Like if you watch your dog run into a glass door, what do? They
Yeah.
shake.
Yeah.
Yeah, they either
Okay.
make noise or their whole body shakes. That is their way of releasing the trauma that just happened. So that way they can keep moving on their life without carrying it with them. So it's the same thing for humans. If we don't allow ourselves that emotional release, we haven't actually completed the cycle. So it means that we will stay in that cycle and we will continue to carry it until we create that opportunity to have that release. So it becomes this, where before you might be in the space of like, oh, I don't want to cry, I don't want to let this go. Once you start having these emotional releases, you're like, awesome, not carrying that one anymore, check, it's gone. So you can start to think of it from this play of like allowing your body to actually let go of the things that it's holding on to.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. That happened. I was doing like a little speaker workshop in Minnesota a couple months ago, and there was like a story that had come up from childhood, and for me, and I was like, okay, do I tell this on stage? Where does this go? Whatever. And it was me and a bunch of guys in this workshop, and And it's like one minute I'm crying and the next minute I'm like totally back to where
Yes.
I'm at. And they're just looking and I'm like, no, that's like, I'm good. Like
Yes.
they're like, do you need it? And I'm like, no, I'm good. Like I just had it. Like, like
Yes.
I don't need a minute. I just had my
Yeah,
minute.
that was it.
That was it. And now
Yes.
I'm back. Right. And I
Yes.
think they're like, what is wrong with her? And I'm like, I just like, why carry it?
Yes.
Just,
When
it
we
just needed to come out. So it came
exactly.
out and now we can talk about whatever. And they're just like, I think they're afraid of what they could say next or what do we, and I'm like, no, we're like, I'm serious. It's cleared. It's cleared.
Yes. Yes. And that's like, if you look at children, right, they can go from that like deep in the sadness to the next minute, like, can we play with blocks or can we do something? It's like, because they're going through the cycle and they're allowing themselves naturally to go through this cycle. So and it is so true. Like, I think we always think it has to be, you know, tears also. Like, yes, crying is an incredible release, but sometimes yawning can be a release, or sighing can be a release, or you know, screaming into a pillow is also a release. Like, but it's actually allowing yourself to let go of whatever is there. And yes, like you said, then you're not carrying it anymore and you're like, I'm actually ready to move on, so we don't
Yeah,
need
I'm
any
ready to
more.
move on. Yeah. And what a
Yes.
great calibration. Like you don't have to go to
Yes.
therapy. Now, I'm nothing against therapy. I think
Right.
therapy's great and there's a place for it, but why wait? Why wait when you can
Right.
self-regulate and you can
Yes.
calibrate as life is happening?
Yes, and if you can feel that coming to the surface and allow yourself to sit in that uncomfortable, right? Because like the other cliche where everybody talks about you have to go through it, right? So if you've pressed something down, you have to allow it to move back through you. So in that, you have to sit back in the uncomfortable feelings and allow them to surface. So if you can allow yourself to sit in that uncomfortable space through the release, it's even more powerful because you've really experienced that emotion to allow yourself to actually move on. So
Yeah, that's
yeah,
the hard part, right? Is
it's
that
yes. Yes. Especially in the moment, you're like, oh, there it is.
yeah, I'll deal with this later, right?
Yeah,
Like where we are. I'll
exactly.
just deal with this some other day. Like,
Exactly.
okay, sure, why
Exactly.
not?
Yes, exactly.
It's gonna come out when you don't want it to.
Hmm.
Can you take us through a little breath work? Would you mind taking us through a little, maybe a little something that can just
Yes.
help people when they're going through a hard moment or just need to calibrate throughout the day? Is there a little exercise that you go to yourself or you teach?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that has been one of the most incredible things that I've learned with the breath is this tool that we carry around with us that we don't realize how powerful it is. I think we all think of the breath when it comes to anxiousness of like how shallow it gets in the chest and like how tight we get. And so we know that our breath is really connected to that space, but we don't always realize that we can use our breath to our benefit to really support our nervous system. So that's one of my favorite things to do is like there's such simple breaths that you can do either right before a big moment or proactively in the morning. But one breath that I really have enjoyed doing with people and I do myself is a breath it's called heart coherent breathing. And again, it's so simple, right? And we'll go through it together. But what it does is creates harmony in the body by connecting the breath and the heart rate together. So when we think about that, we think of, heart rate variability is such a big thing in the performance space now and understanding that. And, our breath becomes this gateway to the nervous system. So when we are, in these shallow breaths, we are in the sympathetic nervous system. We're in fight or flight, and we're operating from that amygdala reptilian part of our brain, right? Who's like, my job is just to keep you alive. I don't care what else. Like, we're not creative. We're not doing anything else. We are literally just staying alive. And when we continue to operate in that space, we cannot drop into our creativity. We cannot drop into this version of ourselves that we know is aligned and the human that we are like meant to be on this planet. So when we can choose breaths that really drop us into that parasympathetic nervous system, it allows us to be in that rest and digest, kind of in that rest and receive, and just full like operation the way that the body is meant to operate and all your systems and all of the pieces. So I would be happy to walk everybody through a few minutes of heart coherence. And this is something that you can do for 2 minutes in the morning. This is something that you can do. Let's say you're about to walk into a big presentation and your mind has just taken over. Like, this is a beautiful practice that you can just kind of reconnect with yourself and reconnect with your breath. So yeah, if you're ready, we can all settle in a little bit. So if you're listening, you're welcome to close your eyes or you can soften your gaze. But we're just going to take a moment. And when we do the heart coherent breathing, we're going to breathe in for a count of 5, and we're going to breathe out for a count of 5. So we're meant to take about 5 to 6 breaths a minute. And that breath, the amount of breath in the 5 to 6 breaths per minute really just settles the body, settles the heart rate. So I'll count with you while we go through this so you can just settle in. So go ahead, we'll just take a breath in together. A brief exhale together. And go ahead, take a breath in, 2, 3, 4, 5, and breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I want you to stay with that breath pattern for another moment. If the counting is helpful for you, you can keep counting the breaths. If you prefer, if you just keep your inhale and your exhale the same length. But as you're breathing, I want you to actually bring your awareness down into your heart space. So when you take a breath in, it's as if you're breathing actually into your heart. Really feel the heart space expanding. And when you breathe out, just allow yourself to let go from the heart. You can even visualize the heart space letting go of anything that's no longer serving it. But just take a moment and sit in that space. Feel the expansion that comes in with every breath and the release of every exhale. And as you're sitting in this space, in this connection to the heart, just give yourself a moment to check in. As we talk about this wisdom and clarity that comes from within us, our heart carries a lot of it. So while you're really sitting in this heart space, just allow yourself a moment to see what wisdom is there for you today. Maybe it's silence. Maybe it's inner calm and peace. Maybe there are a few words of direction and guidance for you. Whatever's there, it's all okay. Just allow yourself to connect to it for a moment. While you're in there, just give yourself a little acknowledgement for showing up in this space today, allowing yourself to sit in the quiet in this brief moment. There's a lot of busyness going on in the world. Go ahead and take one more deep breath down into the heart space. And a big sigh out the mouth. And when you're ready, you can slowly start to wiggle the fingers and toes. Connect back to the space around you. Slowly start to open your eyes.
That was so nice.
Good. I'm so glad.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And it's one that I love to do in the morning, first thing. And I would say anybody who is in that space where you know your nervous system needs support, anytime you can really connect to that deep diaphragmatic breathing, breathing deep into the belly, and just really extending your exhale, making it longer than your inhale, that in and of itself will really start to calm the nervous system and let it know that, okay, I'm safe in this moment. I can kind of drop out of that fight or flight mode and start to connect back with the parasympathetic nervous system.
What a great tip, because we usually, when you think of breathing, when people say like breathe, right? You start to hold your breath, or you're
Yes.
breathing is shallow. The first thing we focus on, I think, is the breath in, not the
Yes,
exhale.
exactly. That
Great
literally
distinction.
is like
Yeah, we
the
go, okay.
simplest thing you can do in that moment. Like in the moment of anxiousness when you feel it. I do it all day. Like when I start to feel the overwhelm kick in,
Yep.
it's like, okay, extend the exhale. Start
Yeah.
there, extend the exhale.
The other thing that came up for me too, as I'm listening to your words and dropping, like just visualizing dropping the breath into my heart. Heart disease is the number one cause of death for women. Right?
Yes.
Heart attack. Like, so
Yes.
just like thinking about, and actually it's interesting that this will air in February. February is Heart Month.
Yes. Yes.
So, if you could think about nurturing the heart and dropping that breath into the heart, like, and syncing up with that heart rate variability, getting that synced up to the breath, that's got to do something amazing for us.
Yes. It is so incredible. Like I remember the first time I really felt that shift. So where you're feeling the breath kind of up in the nose, and then when you actually bring that awareness down into the body, that's where magic happens. When we drop kind of out of the head and actually into the body, into the heart. Yeah, there's so much connection and so much, I think, especially as women, we ignore, right? Because the world is so busy, and it's like there's so much guidance and just connection there back to the body that I think is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, I interviewed it's Carolee Brown. She's the editor in chief and VP at Success Magazine, and she had a heart attack at 39.
Wow.
And she had an underlying a heart defect that she never knew about. That was a piece of it. But she's very honest about her stress load too, and just
Yes.
realizing that, like, okay, it's a 2-hour train ride every day. Okay, well, that's stress, right? And so,
Yes.
like, it was just all these little things that you don't even realize are stress, and then you have the other things, all the pressure that we put on ourselves.
Yes.
And it's no wonder that, and we just think like, okay, we'll get to that until
Right.
something happens.
Right.
But to be able to stop and have the mindfulness, so important.
Yes. The stress is truly running so much of the show that we don't even realize. And yeah, if we can find tools, I think, what I love about the breath and gratitude is like you don't have to reach for anything outside of yourself. So much of it we think we have to reach for those external things, but you're literally carrying this around with you all day. And if you can figure out how to use it to empower yourself, I mean, it kind of makes you a little bit unstoppable.
Yeah, it really does. I remember when I went through my divorce, and it was 10 years ago, and it was such a gut punch. It was such a dark
Yes.
time in my space, in my life, and I went to gratitude multiple times throughout the day. And I wish I would have had this, because if I could have had both gratitude and the breath,
Yes.
it's always available to you. You can
Yes.
do it anywhere. You
Yes.
don't have to. Yeah.
Yes. I think especially for uh, anyone who said that they could never meditate, because they're like, nope, mine's too busy. I'm like, that is not the point of it. It's not to get to the space of a quiet mind. And I think the breath becomes an active gateway to that space, right? You have something else. The point is really to give your mind another job besides the worry and the overwhelm. So if you can give it that job to connect with the breath, it can feel more of an active meditation, but you're connecting to those same spaces and allowing the mind to kind of come offline so the body can connect and do what it needs to do.
Another great distinction. It's not that you're trying to give the brain, like, the brain's not supposed to be working. You're just giving it another job.
Yes.
I think most people, including myself, think like, oh, I always like the guided meditations, because I can focus on something, which takes
Yes.
me away from the other things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's just giving the brain a break from the busyness of it and allowing it to just settle into something else.
Yeah. Well, I am so beyond excited about this next chapter that you and Matt, your husband, are on, and that you're bringing this. You're bringing this to so many places that needs it so desperately. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you're doing with the motion and gratitude?
Yes. So Thank you. So this really started when I kind of went through my own experience 7 years ago. I was like, why are people not talking about this? Or it's being talked about, but there's not really a path in which somebody can take to really explore this in an intentional way that they can build a ritual around this and really create a routine that works for them. So I set out to create something that people could really experience. And so we've created a 28-day gratitude experience that's, a combined physical product and digital experience that people can go through. And that really, in that season, it was like, how can I help moms in this moment, right? It was like, I got to help the mamas, they're in it. But then as things started to evolve, I would have this conversation with all different people. And my husband took it to, he was a financial planner and, was responsible for a team of, young financial planners that were growing their business, and he brought it to them, and to see the impact in their life also, it's like, this is for everyone, right? This is so simple and approachable for everyone. So we started to expand out and really started to offer the experience in different settings, and it's been really fun to bring it into corporations and see how it's shifted a culture of a corporation as they all go on this gratitude experience together. But what I'm really excited about this year is bringing it into the education space. So being able to, we took that digital experience and turned it into a workbook curriculum for grade school, middle school, and high school. Because what we have heard is so many schools understand the importance of mindfulness, but they don't have a curriculum and they don't have a way to structure it. They're like, we know we need to do this stuff, but it would fall so deeply on the teachers to figure it out, and they don't have the capacity to do this. They are operating, and the work that teachers are doing right now is beyond teaching. So it's like, how can we create something that's simple for the teachers to really allow the students to empower themselves? So we're really excited to be in the school system this year and doing some work with the Boys and Girls Club, and really just creating opportunities to help this next generation have these tools earlier on, right? Because I think, I didn't know about these things till I was in my 30s. So imagine, especially in the world that they're growing up in, of disconnection and busyness, it's like we've got to help them to be able to connect back to themselves in this life. So I'm really excited for those pieces, and seeing the conversations and the excitement of the schools has been very, very cool. So I'm looking forward to all these pieces this year.
Yes, I mean, just I think I had said this to you before, that, I still haven't used a parallelogram.
Right. Right.
And apparently math isn't the math that I learned anymore either.
Right. Exactly.
Because when I see these equations that are put up on Facebook and they're like, well, what's the answer? And I was like, I don't have it.
Nope.
So, and I'm like, what are we teaching, and what, and how are we utilizing this? And why aren't we teaching more of the tools that we need through life? You and I found this stuff out of desperation, and I truly believe that most adults find it out of desperation. We're at the bottom going, man, like I've taken it so hard on the chin. Now I'm finally ready, because there's nothing in the tank. I finally realized that my way doesn't work. But like, how can we get ahead of this? And I do believe, I would love your take on this. It seems to me like other cultures have this. We don't have it.
Yes. I think that's been the really interesting thing, because exactly to your point, right? And this is a thought that I've had for a while, and, especially with my own kids growing up and being in this world. And, you watch some of the smartest kids, the best athletes, right? All these kids that were like, they're going to have a successful career and they're going to go on to do all these great things. They're in high school and they're having panic attacks on the court. If these kids cannot learn to regulate their nervous system, it doesn't matter how smart they are. They're not going to be able to show up in those seasons of their life and perform and do the things that are important to them and actually have a life. Because so it's finally, I think, becoming more apparent to people, because I've had so many parents say, yeah, my son or daughter had a panic attack on the basketball court, or they have a big test and they are not taught how to regulate before these experiences. And I think we've pushed and added so much to the point where, one, it's too much for any human, let alone a child who's at a season of their life where like they learn by play, they learn through experience, they learn in such different ways. So it's just been a very interesting experience to navigate. And it just feels like it's a time where if we don't do something, everything's going to get to this place of desperation. Right now, it's not going to happen in the 30s. It's happening way younger, and it's like it's time to step up and do something about it.
Yeah, it really is because as we mentioned before, the stress is there everywhere, and there's
Yes.
only so much that the nervous system can handle. So there's
Yes.
these situations that are high pressure, high stress, and by the way, stress is not always all bad. We need stress in our lives. But when it's coming at us for every single, right? Like I'm getting it from my computer right now. I have these lights in front of me. I mean, it's just the phone, the this, and it's everywhere. It's the commute into work, and then on top of that, now we're supposed to have something left in our nervous system tank to be able to deal with these situations, but we weren't taught how to self-regulate any of it.
Yes.
So what's going to happen? We're going to melt down. We're going to break down. We're going to burn out.
Yes.
Like to me, this is a big secret to not burning out.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
there's anybody that's been very close to it multiple times. It's me.
Yes. Yes.
You know, because I didn't have the tools.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. I love having these conversations and to really see that shift happening. Because I think there was a lot of people who were doing this work behind the scenes. Like if you even look at, like the sports teams, right? The ones that have been successful, they're doing mindfulness. They're bringing in breath coaches. Like they're doing all of this. They just haven't always talked about it. Exactly.
Whether they think it's like a secret trick and they don't want to tell, or they think it's too woo, I'm not sure. But you're right. They keep it behind doors.
Exactly. So I think now that people are starting to peel that back, and even you look at high performers, Tony Robbins does breath work and all of these things. You think of all these people in these spaces and they're using it as a performance enhancer, as basically as a tool for them. So it's like it's time for us all to really understand that connection back to ourselves. And that's what they're doing. They're just connecting back to their inherent, their body, their guidance, and really their wisdom of like, okay, this is what I'm here to do, and being able to operate from that space. Like you think of athletes, like they're coming into their clarity of all the work that they've done. They're not letting the nerves determine how they show up on the court, and they're actually just in that flow state, that everybody talks about.
Yeah, and the connection to self. I feel like, do you feel like people are not connected to themselves, that they're just, numbing or from one thing to the next and like I had a conversation recently with somebody in a corporation about, well, like, do you guys ever just sit around and think about this?
Yeah.
I can relate it to thinking because most people don't actually sit and think. It's like, well, I got to be busy. Well, no, like, what if you just sat with a pad of paper and a pen for an hour and you picked a topic? There's a guy, Keith Cunningham, that talks about this. He schedules thinking time on his calendar, and somebody had asked him something. He's like, well, get with so-and-so, his secretary. I don't have any, I'll get back to you. Let me think about it. I'll get back to you next Thursday. And it was like Monday of this week, but he's like, I don't have, and he's like, well, wait, that's like 10 days away. The guy that was asking him the question. And Keith was like, well, yeah, I don't have any time on my calendar to think until the following Thursday because I'm traveling. And the guy's like, what? What are you talking about? He's like, you don't have time on your calendar to think? And then we all, of course, were going like, man, I don't have time on my calendar to think at that point. But he was like, yeah, I have time every Thursday, and I pick a topic, and all my alerts are off, and I have to just sit and think about. And I was like, wow, what if we just did that and connected with ourselves?
Yes, I'd say that resonates, especially so this week. I feel like there's like so many moving parts that I'm trying to put together, right? I'm like, there's all these things, and I sometimes find myself sitting at my desk trying to just like muscle through it, right? And it's like, you're going to muscle through it and you're going to figure it out as you go, but there's no clarity, there's no creativity, there's no like, do this, then this. And I was like, that's it. I am going for a walk. I'm getting my dog. We're going out in nature and we're going for a walk. The amount of clarity that I got from that walk of like, this is where your next step is, and this is the person you're going to call, and this is how you're going to get this done. And it's like, we think it's a step back, but in reality, it is actually allowing us, it's like setting an intention, right? It's giving us the space to be able to slow down, remove all the distractions, and really focus on that one intentional thing that we want to do, which then starts to create the roadmap. So it's like all those moments where we try and
force.
Yeah. And I tell myself, I'm like, I don't need a walk. And then you go, you're like, oh yes, I need that so badly. And the connection to nature, all the pieces, it truly is, we need it. We are hardwired for that connection to nature. We're hardwired for these spaces of quiet and calm. And, think about all of the times you've forced things through, like how messy it gets, right? But when you actually take a step back and make time for the clarity, it's like, look at all the pieces that fall together in such a beautiful way.
Yeah. And to know the difference too, right? The discernment, because well, like sometimes you just have to muscle through folding your laundry.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely.
Or
Absolutely. Not
getting
much
like
thought
the
there.
next 2 reps out, or getting your
Yes.
butt to the gym, or like there's places where you're like, okay, I've got to. But to understand and recognize those moments where you're really trying to force
Yes.
and see that you're getting absolutely nowhere.
Yes, exactly.
Like this is not the moment to force. This is the
Yes.
moment to actually like do the opposite and release and give myself the space and opportunity. And it's crazy. Like I don't know the science behind it. Maybe you do, but it's crazy how it's like it just drops in
Yeah.
and you're
Well,
not even thinking about it. It just is like,
yes.
whoa. It
Yes.
just I know it now.
Yes. I don't know all the science behind it. I don't know that it's all, I don't think science can tell us all that's behind it. But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
would say, I think the biggest thing that I have found is whenever I am operating. So if you think about what we're talking about with forcing something, whenever you are in that state, you're literally operating from your sympathetic nervous system. So you're operating from a different part of your brain. So when you're in that sympathetic state, the amygdala is the part of your brain that people refer to as like the reptilian part, right? It's the part that we had back in the day when like we were being chased by saber-toothed tigers, so it's like its only job is to keep you alive. So if you're operating from that space, you actually cannot connect to that creativity. So
Mm.
if you think about, I like to think about it that way because sometimes it's helpful of like,
That
okay,
is
if you're,
very helpful.
yeah,
I just got it. Yep.
yeah, if you're in this space and you're constantly trying to force,
No
your
way.
body's like, my job is to only keep you alive. So all I see is threats. So like you're going to be late, you're missing a deadline, it starts telling you all of the things that are not working. So if you're not doing something to intentionally drop yourself into that parasympathetic state, you can't connect to your creativity, because when you move to the parasympathetic, then you're operating from the prefrontal cortex, which is the part right in the front of our mind where it sometimes feels like things drop into. Like that is our connection to creativity. It's our connection to empathy. That is when we're operating from our true selves, we're operating from that part of our mind and our brain. So if you're constantly in that space of force and overwhelm, you're not getting into the creative space to actually hear where you need to go. So that's been helpful for me recently, now that I understand that a little bit better. But it's just, yeah, kind of cool to think of it that way.
Thank you for sharing that, because that just gave us the reason why, and also the reason why you force yourself and you're like, I don't want to walk. I don't need to walk right now. Like, no,
Exactly.
exactly. It's exactly what you need because you're
Yes.
stuck. You're stuck right
Exactly.
now, and you're never going to
Yes.
get unstuck if you keep trying the way you're trying.
Exactly. And your brain's there trying to do its work, right? Because it's like, no, if you walk, you're going to be even later. Like
Yeah.
it's keeping you in that space that it's designed to keep you in. So to your point, that's the time where we have to just do the thing that we know we have to do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Shannon, this has been such a pleasure and such a treat. And I just feel myself, I feel, like I said in the beginning, I'm just calmer when I'm around you. I felt myself settle back in as well. Where can people find you if they want this for themselves as an individual, or they're a school or a corporation? Like, where can they get more of you and more of the motion of gratitude?
Yes. Thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation. I've so enjoyed this today. And so you can find more about the business at themotionofgratitude.com. That is really the best space to explore what we're doing there and really connect. If you want to learn more about the school piece or more about the corporations, at the Motion of Gratitude on Instagram, or I would say Instagram is probably the best space. You can reach out to me directly there, because we've been really creating and customizing as much as we can for each space. So I love having that conversation, seeing what it is that you're looking for, and being able to support you in that space. So, yep. And then we have our podcast, and that's all on the Motion of Gratitude YouTube as well. So
And we'll
those
put
are
all
all our
this in the show
spots.
notes. Shannon,
Thank you.
thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Christy. This has been awesome. I appreciate it.